the Earthmaster back here on this Tuesday night. It is August 15th here along the West Coast, about 11:15 California time in the PM out here. Latest activity, it looks like a 1.9 along the California region. Also some activity stirring up across the Hawaii area down there across the Pahala region. This activity definitely been kicking up across the Kilauea volcano, but this 2.1 a ways away from this area. Now looking at the Kilauea volcano, the last earthquake here was roughly about 8:30 my time. So we're looking at coming up upon 2 hours since the last earthquake. Now what that means, it's hard to say, but we've seen some previous earthquake activity out here in a very good swarm fashion. Maybe taking a little pause out here across the Kilauea volcano. We haven't really seen any updates here from the USGS. Their last daily update here was from earlier today, talking about how Kilauea volcano is currently not erupting, but the seismicity of the earthquake activity has been increasing, along with summit tilt meters showing inflation out here across the area of the Kilauea volcano. So continuing to watch that. Right now, a little pause in the earthquake activity across the volcano there on the Big Island, the Kilauea volcano. Rest of the globe here, let's go ahead and check this out, see what we got stirring up out here across California. Now we're stirring up in an area where I don't want to see, because this region here is just on the North American side of the plate boundary. Typical stress boundaries out here include, let me show you guys here real quick, the area of the West Coast, right? You got the Pacific plate moving off to the northwest, generally along this plate boundary. There's many other fault systems that do not work that way across the West Coast, and many other areas away from the plate boundary, but this is just a general plate stress out here. Northwest here, southeast here for the North American plate here, but the general overall seismic GPS stations here, the arrows show west-northwest with the Pacific plate, and kind of southwest here with the North American plate. But you can see these arrows here. This is strain across the West Coast area. And there's been a little bit of activity stretching out here across the Southern California area, just outside of this Indio region, it looks like, north of Coachella, with a swarm of activity. Basically just off of this fault system known as the San Andreas Fault, right? You wouldn't think anything of it unless you knew exactly what the capabilities are out here as far as large scale movement goes. So this area, the southern branch here, showing a little bit of activity, just barely off. We're talking about literally, maybe a mile at the most here off of the plate boundary. Swarming activity. And this activity right here is a little concerning. The reason why is because it's right next to a sleeping giant, a sleeping monster, so to speak. And the strain here, the general strain, right? If you remember, northwest with the Pacific plate, we're taking this massive amount of land. Los Angeles heading to the northwest. The general plate movement here across the North American plate to the southeast here. We got this bullseye area showing some movement. And that's where we don't want to see it, because this will could potentially trigger a large-scale earthquake out here across the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault. Man, it's not bugs. I'm telling you, there's a lot of negative energy out here today in my neck of the woods. I'll get to that here in just a little bit. But yeah, this activity, again, there's a little fault system here called the Berdoo Canyon Fault. Now, these are just little bitty fault systems that run off of the plate boundary, somewhat relieving stress out here. So when we see these little fault systems showing elevated swarms and activity, that's a time to pay a very close attention here. So kind of watching that. If this breaks out into a little bit more further swarming, I'm probably going to have to issue an earthquake watch out here for Southern California. But right now, with this activity, it's still a little concerning, but only about 11 earthquakes here. The largest so far, a 2.5 earthquake in this mix. I'm hoping this is just some aftershock activity here outside of this region of the San Andreas Fault. But we'll continue to watch that pretty closely. Some movement here along the creeping segment of the San Andreas Fault near Parkville, a 2.7 earlier this afternoon. A couple other smaller quakes in there as well. General activity here across the plate boundary shows some elevated movement, as we can see here across this area of Southern California. Northern California, not so much. Not so much. Vice versa, right? Normally Northern California and areas north of the, roughly about the Garlock shear zone normally show activity, while this area down south is very quiet. But today, it's the opposite. Active up here or down here. Quiet for the most part in Northern California, so we'll continue to watch that. Up here across the Canada region, did see an earthquake just off the Queen Charlotte Sound area, 4.4 earlier this morning. Now this is north of the Cascadia subduction zone. I do want to double check what's going on up here as far as Cascadia tremor goes. It's pretty quiet here though in the last 24 hours. 21 epicenters of tremor. A little bit up north, a little bit down south. Nothing major going on for now. We'll continue to watch that though. Areas across the Aleutian Trench definitely showed some heightened movement here with a 4.7 earlier this morning. We also did see a 4.0 into the deeper regions here of the subduction zone about afternoon time period or so, along with a 3.0 a little bit further west along the Aleutian Trench, the plate boundary. So things are kicking up here in the northern edge of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Nothing else showing up here across the Kuril-Kamchatka, but we know, and I keep saying that area is primed. I think it's primed here for a big one. Looking at the globe here, the white rings obviously showing some newer. I could have swore I felt an earthquake here. Got my earthquake 3D rock, or my earthquake crystal up here, swinging back and forth slightly. Now, that could be because I have the door closed here to the computer room. I'm guessing it may be fan movement. I don't know. Let me double check the seismographs. I don't have Missy Mimi's coming in here asking about an earthquake she just felt. So, might just be some wind events going on here in the computer room. 5.2, filling in across the Solomon Islands area. This has been our quiet zone here, so we expect activity to fill in. You know, you can really never guess the estimated magnitudes across here, but normally around a 4 to 5. It's when these areas go quiet for weeks at a time, or months at a time, where we could see upwards of 6 or larger. But when you're talking about months or years at a time, like the Kuril-Kamchatka, you know, these little wimpy 4-pointers up here are not relieving the stress that has been accumulated up here. We're talking about well above a 7 for this area soon. But there is some activity, obviously, Solomon Islands, Fiji area as well. Let's go ahead and go down here and check it out, see what we got. There is that 5.2 outside the Solomon Islands area into the Vanuatu area. Now, if you notice, both of these earthquakes are deep movement quakes here. So that's continuing to add strain up at the surface levels of the plate boundary. Watch this pretty closely here, because we could expect some larger scale movement within the quiet zones. Obviously, we did see some activity, but the deeper scale movement earthquakes add further strain into the areas that are already quiet. So that includes Solomon Islands, potentially south of the Port Vila area. Watch that pretty closely. New Zealand, nothing showing up on the USGS map. Let's go ahead and check out the GeoNet servers and see what's going on out here. Stand by for a second. Let's refresh this latest information here from the GeoNet pretty clear far as the National Seismograph Network goes. I'm not seeing any large-scale movement out there across New Zealand. A little bit of activity down here across South Island. It looks like maybe 6 or 7 hours ago. But aside from that, things are pretty quiet. I think we can find that earthquake pretty easily. 6 or 7 hours ago. Looks like the 3.3 down here. 6 hours ago, South Island area. South or north of the St. Arnaud area. But for now, things quiet. Temporarily across the area of New Zealand. Further west, way west here, we got one earthquake of 5.2, Turkmenistan area earlier this evening, about 44 kilometers deep near the Caspian Sea region. It's a little odd earthquake out here. Let's go ahead and double check, see what we got for earthquake activity. As far as large-scale movement goes, I kind of want to see 6.0 and above. Well, since about, well, the world began back in the year 0. Let's go ahead and see what we got here across the region of this area. Near the Caspian Sea, I know we do see some larger scale movement out here. We have seen some. Just kind of want to, you know, look into history a little bit, at least as far as what the USGS is stating here. Earthquakes loading. All right, so Caspian Sea region here. Talking about areas well east of Turkey, west of Afghanistan. Some 6s and 7s popping off out there historically. Looks like back in 1990, a 7-pointer. Quite a few 7s out here. Notice that across the area. So this earthquake activity out here today could be a little sign of some movement going on out there. But for now, 5.2. Eastern side of the Caspian Sea. Areas further west, pretty quiet out there across Turkey for the most part. The EMSC model globe here showing some 2s and 3s out there, along with that 5.2 around the Caspian Sea area. For the most part, the Atlantic Ocean, 4.9 Mid-Atlantic Ridge. I don't. Looks like USGS is reporting that earlier this afternoon. Aside from that, though, things pretty quiet out there across the divergent boundaries. South America region here, 5.2 Peru early this morning, it looks like. All right, let's double check here. Eastern portion of the country, pretty quiet. Some minimal movement across Yellowstone. Big area right now. Like I said, I think we need to watch areas across the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault. It's right here on the eastern side the plate boundary, right where you would expect the stress to build up as far as transferring, so to speak, off the plate boundary. So it's a little concerning, folks. I do have a couple different seismograph stations out there. Right now, that activity you're seeing is across Hawaii, Cone Peak, and also this Hawaii digital station. That is some activity kicking off into the Kilauea volcano. It doesn't look like anything's picked up yet. This is recent activity across the Kilauea volcano. Eventually, the USGS will pick up on it. But this activity you're seeing, it looks like some further 2-pointers or maybe a 3-pointer popping up there across the Kilauea volcano. I'm not for sure why everything came to a pause right now at 8:30. I don't know. I've seen it in the past. Things just come to a pause. We lost the visual. They do have a YouTube channel that they're showing the caldera out here. That was circulating far as buffering since probably about the past 4 hours or so. Even though it's still live, it's showing buffering activity from 4 hours ago. Now the recent webcam images, we'll just double check that and see what's going on here. I lost it as soon as I started the live stream. I'm not for sure why, but Let's go ahead and check out the cameras out here across the Kilauea volcano, see what's going on. It's just, I don't know. I'm not in charge of this, so I can't say what's going on specifically. I'm just looking at seismograph stations. Everything's dark out there. Something's brewing out there. Notice that? I don't know what it is. That's at 2010. So this is local time, I believe, but there's a little bit of brightness going on out there across the Caldera region. Seismic uptick. Inflation there going on across the tilt meters. Webcams going offline. It's a little sketchy. So we'll have to wait for the professionals out here. We're talking about the USGS. These are public servants, so to speak. They get paid by the public, taxpayers, to provide us with knowledge. So I think they should probably do their job, and report back on what they're observing out there across Kilauea volcano. Because unfortunately, we can't access all the public information out there across the board that should be accessible. Right now, the latest update was put out earlier. Elevated earthquake activity, elevated inflation, earthquake swarms going on. I think it's time for an update there for the folks across Hawaii. Let us know what's going on there, USGS, if we're into the eruptive stage or not. For now, according to the professionals, the USGS, the public servants out here, we're still sitting at the advisory and the yellow stage, but this should kick up here soon, overnight, I believe. All right, let's see what else we got here. Space weather, anything going on out here across the sun? Well, that's a beautiful image. I love that image of the sun there. That's my desktop image, as you guys can see here. A couple different solar flares out there on the desktop image. I love just staring at these solar flares. So right now, during a time of quietness, it's not all that active. Here's the latest look here at the UV filter ray of the sunspots and of the sun in general. Looks like an active region out there across the western limb, but this has no concern here amongst us humans on the Earth. Anything that does blast off, whether it's a X flare or a major Carrington event, will not be Earth directed at all. What we have to worry about is anything coming around the eastern limb and the sunspots that are currently facing the Earth. The current magnetogram image here will give us a good indicator of what's going on. Sunspot up here, a very dynamic area as far as the largeness of it, but that's about it. The only area of sunspot region that I am paying close attention to is this region down here. Notice that a couple different structures here within the core rapidly intensifying. And this one's grown pretty dynamically here over the last about 48 hours or so. We are looking at a couple newer regions around the eastern limb, but they do not look all that impressive. We'll definitely continue to watch 3407 and potentially 3405 here in the coming days or coming hours and days. Right now, 99% chance for a C flare. It's been somewhat upgraded. M flare at 15% chance and X flare around 1%. So probabilities have gone up slightly. There's the massive 3403 again. That's split. Not a whole lot of dynamic there within that sunspot core. So we'll watch the mentioned regions. All right, Storm Prediction Center here. Yeah, we got a little bit of thunderstorm activity, it looks like, through the remainder of the night here across California region. I do want to talk about what's going on here in the future. We're talking about, well, a hurricane off the southern tip of California. Pretty interesting, right? What do you guys think? Let's go check it out here real quick. Stand by for a second while I bring up the correct models here. It's just the heat. I'm telling you, the heat and the negativity. I'll tell you guys in a minute. Been dealing with a whole lot of negativity out here recently. locally inside the house. So this is pretty promising here. Look at that. Look at the latest update here across the just off the tip of Baja California. Now, earlier this morning, it showed this hurricane venturing off into the Pacific away from California. Now it shows it hitting California directly. Oh my goodness. You guys see that down there in Southern California? Those are flooding rain rates out there. That's right on the San Andreas Fault. Southern California area, spewing up a lot of moisture out here across the west coast. This would be very interesting to check out. Again, goodness, I may have to drive down there. I may have to venture down to Southern California to experience this type of event. It doesn't happen all that often. We hardly ever do we see a hurricane of this strength venture up into Southern California. I don't know how powerful it's going to be when it does make landfall there across Southern California. We got a high pressure system building up behind it, but the rainfall rates are going to be there. It's a little odd, right? Wouldn't you agree? Look at that. To see a Pacific hurricane venture right up into California. Most of the time it's directed way out here towards Hawaii, so I'm going to pay very close attention to this. I may have to take a little trip down to SoCal, see what's going on. In the meantime, well, a little bit later out into the month of August here, we got a tropical hurricane here venturing over the Florida area and strengthening in the Gulf, potentially hitting the Louisiana area. Talking about Baton Rouge area. This is a ways out. This is roughly about 2 weeks out. This activity that you see here hitting Southern California, only a few days out, and it's been very consistent. Models here have been showing the potential for a some type of tropical development, tropical storm, hurricane hitting the Southern California area. Now this is a lot more northward than what the previous model showed. So this is something to watch. It's not showing it venturing further off to the west, away from California. This is directing it at California. So we'll watch this very, very closely in the coming days, because this will play a part on if I make a move down there. It's only 6 hour, well, 7 hour, 8 hour drive from Northern California, but this is something that I need to experience, and yeah, I will be covering that live if that does take place. That's a fact. So watch for that. What do we got for 24-hour accumulated precipitation amounts? Now this is a general accumulated precipitation. Well, let's go back here. Total accumulated precipitation amounts. There we go. This gives you a broad view of what the hurricane there in Southern California could bring about. Talking about rainfall rates down there across the San Andreas Fault, the Salton Sea area. Well, oh man, 6 to 7 inches in probably a day or two period. That's some significant flash flooding down there. That right there is not what California needs, but also it'd be very interesting to see what happens with the fault systems out there. The San Andreas Fault. That's all we need is a little lubrication out there to get things going. So this is goodness. It's a very interesting scenario. We'll watch this. And of course, I'm covering this in every update. We'll cover this a little bit later tomorrow as well, and see how this plays out. This is a very unusual setup here. We just don't see that at all out here across the West Coast. Yeah, Florida, Gulf of Mexico, East Coast. Yes, they get hurricanes all the time, but California, that doesn't happen. So I'm going to watch this pretty closely 5 days out. Windy, let me see what Windy is reporting here. Windy is another weather model, and I'm freezing in here. 67 degrees in the computer room. Oh my gosh, goodness. It's 110, 112 today. So as you guys can see, there's that tropical development building off the coast of Mexico. Notice that wind, right? Look at that. Wind gust. We'll pick this up here a little bit. It does strengthen into a pretty significant type of hurricane as we get into Saturday the 19th. Look how big it is. It's got a beautiful eye. Looking at, what do we got? Nah, I guarantee you there's a lot more than 34 miles an hour out there. You guys can see it. Come Saturday night, Sunday, it's brewing up the Baja California area. Monday the 21st. Notice that it does, man, that's interesting here. This north flow, that's a high pressure system, so that's going to be dependent. Moisture that we get up here, it's going to be dependent on how close this high pressure system is to the west coast. If it's further to the west, that may allow more moisture in Northern California and the west coast area. But either way, it does look like Southern California is going to get hit with this tropical system, which is kind of rare, right? Very rare. And of course, that will bring some moisture up into the west coast area. Radar, let's go to rain accumulation here. This is the windy model next 10 days. Hey, goodness, holy smokes. This is the ECM model, HRR model, doesn't go quite that far out. GFS model next 10 days shows most of the activity across Southern California, but still, that's some considerable rainfall amounts out there. The ECM model, we'll watch this pretty closely. That's more accurate. It looks like Northern California an inch or so. Down here across Ventura, a few inches, obviously 5 inches or so. This is all subject to what's going on with the high pressure system out here. We're not talking about, low pressure, which is counterclockwise out here across the northern hemisphere. We're talking about the clockwise. Clockwise is high pressure system, and that could scoot the hurricane further east, or it could scoot it further out to the west. It depends on what the upper level winds and ultimately the pressure differences are, what's taking place out here. Either way, it's a very interesting subject to have a hurricane hit the Southern California area. We'll continue to watch that for sure. All right, so a lot going on. We got Kilauea volcano and maybe a tropical system hitting into California. I mean, this is just very rare to see this type of activity out here. We'll catch you guys back here tomorrow. I did cover the Kilauea volcano a little bit more in a previous update. I'll provide that at the end of this update video. I think things are definitely kicking up there across the Hawaii Islands area, so we'll be on guard for that. I don't think we're going to see an explosive eruption, but you never know. We are noticing, at least in the last image there across the Kilauea caldera area around the lake, lava lake area, there was some smoke coming up, so that's an obvious sign of volcanic gases and magma finding their way up to the surface to create new land, like it has been for a long time. We'll catch you guys back here tomorrow morning. Have a good one.